Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories. Today, I want to start by sharing something very personal with you, because you are more than just an audience. You're my family. Let me begin with this powerful verse from the Bible. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Proverbs 3:5-6. This verse is my anchor today because I've been feeling really upset. Yesterday I had a tough day, one of those days when life just seems overwhelming. My daughter, who recently gave birth to my grandson, had a heart issue, and I was busy at the hospital, worried about her. On top of that, I posted a story where I might have made some mistakes. To my surprise, some of my loyal family members left harsh comments like, "You are finished," "You're losing your grip," or "We are unsubscribing." I've always welcomed criticism. It helps me grow, but disrespect truly hurts. I want to remind you all that I'm only human. I can't be perfect 100 out of 100 times. Even multi-million-dollar Hollywood projects have flaws, yet they keep going. I sincerely apologize if I hurt or disappointed you in any way, but I want to ask for your understanding. Please don't leave this family. We've built something special together. I love and respect each one of you, and your support means the world to me. So, let's keep growing together. And now let's start today's story. Thank you for being here. The autumn wind whistled through the concrete canyons of Manhattan, sending golden leaves dancing across the rain-slicked streets. Laura Woolvart's heart raced as she sprinted down Fifth Avenue, her vintage leather portfolio clutched tightly against her chest. The morning sun caught the subtle copper highlights in her natural curls, which she'd carefully styled into a crown of intricate twists that morning, a small act of defiance against her stepmother's constant pressure to straighten her hair. At 25, Laura had already defied countless expectations. The Sterling Art Gallery loomed ahead, its limestone facade gleaming like a beacon. 5 years ago, she'd started here as part of the cleaning staff, arriving before dawn to polish the endless expanses of marble floors. Now, her employee badge read Junior Curator, though each promotion had come with twice the scrutiny her colleagues faced. Her phone buzzed, another message from Haley Matthews, her stepmother. Laura silenced it without looking. She already knew what it would say. Another thinly veiled criticism, another suggestion about finding a more suitable career. Another reminder that people like them needed to be practical. Laura had heard it all before, ever since her father's death left her under Haley's guardianship at 16. The gallery's massive bronze doors felt lighter than usual as Laura pushed through them, riding the wave of adrenaline from her rush to make it on time. The security guard, Glenn, gave her a knowing smile. "Cutting it close today, Ms. Woolvart." Traffic was a nightmare, Glenn. Did the Rothko pieces arrive for the modernist exhibition? Laura's voice carried the slight lilt of her early years in South Africa, where she'd lived until age 10. The accent emerged more strongly when she was excited or nervous. Today, she was both. "Arrived an hour ago. Mr. Henderson's been pacing like a caged lion waiting for you." Laura suppressed a groan. James Henderson, the gallery's director, had taken a chance hiring her as a curator. She couldn't afford to give him any reason to regret that decision. Her heels clicked against the marble as she hurried through the still empty gallery spaces, each footstep echoing off the soaring walls. The modern wing was her sanctuary, a space she'd fought hard to make her own. Her latest exhibition, Perspectives in Motion, had drawn record crowds and critical acclaim. Today's installation would be the crown jewel, if she could pull it off perfectly. She rounded the corner into Gallery 7 and froze. A man stood before her newest acquisition, completely absorbed in the massive canvas. Even from behind, everything about him screamed old money. The bespoke charcoal suit, the perfectly trimmed hair, the way he held himself as if the world had been arranged for his convenience. Laura's first instinct was to retreat. She'd had enough interactions with wealthy patrons to know how they typically reacted to a young black woman presuming to explain art to them. But this was her gallery, her exhibition, and she had work to do. She straightened her spine, channeling her father's voice. "Stand tall, my little lioness. The world will try to shrink you. Don't let it." "Good morning," she called out, her voice clear and professional. "I'm afraid we're not open to the public for another hour." The man turned, and Laura felt the air leave her lungs. She'd seen his face before, splashed across business, magazines and real estate sections. Rob Key, 32, the wunderkind developer who was reshaping the Manhattan skyline. His latest project, a controversial arts district development, had been the talk of every gallery in the city. But the magazines hadn't captured his eyes, deep brown with flecks of gold, currently wide with something that looked like recognition. "You're Laura Vulvart," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that caught her off guard. "I read your piece in Art Forum about emerging African artists. Your analysis of contemporary diaspora influences was brilliant." Laura felt heat rise to her cheeks, even as her analytical mind kicked into high gear. What was Rob Key doing in her gallery before hours? Was this about the development project? Had Henderson arranged this without telling her? "I'm surprised you had time for art criticism between building skyscrapers, Mr. Key," she replied, moving closer to the painting. Up close, she could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive that made her think of cedar forests. He laughed, a genuine sound that echoed through the empty gallery. "Please call me Rob, and you'd be surprised what I read at 3 a.m. when I can't sleep, but I'm here because of this piece." He gestured to the canvas before them. "There's something about the way you've positioned it, the lighting, the angle. It's like seeing it for the first time, even though I've viewed this painting a dozen times before." Laura felt her professional passion override her caution. "That's exactly what I was aiming for. The conventional wisdom is to hang Rothkos in isolation, but I thought by creating this sightline from the entrance, playing with the natural light from the skylight." She caught herself starting to ramble and bit her lip, but Rob was nodding enthusiastically, his eyes alight with genuine interest. "It changes the whole conversation about space and perception. It's genius." He turned to face her fully. "Would you have coffee with me? I'd love to hear more about your vision for this space." Warning bells rang in Laura's head. Men like Rob Key didn't just appear in empty galleries to discuss art theory with junior curators. Her stepmother's voice echoed in her mind, reminding her of all the ways the world was waiting to take advantage of her dreams. But there was something in his expression, an earnestness that seemed at odds with his powerful persona. Before she could respond, the gallery's silence was shattered by the arrival of the installation team, their voices bouncing off the high ceilings as they wheeled in crates containing the rest of the exhibition pieces. "I have to oversee the installation," Laura said, already turning toward the commotion. "It's going to take all day." "Dinner then," Rob countered, pulling out a business card. "I know a quiet place in the village. No pressure, no agenda, just a conversation about art and architecture and whatever else comes up." Laura hesitated, then took the card. The heavy paper stock felt like it was burning her fingers. "I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking." He smiled, not the practiced smile she'd seen in his magazine photos, but something softer, almost shy. "I'll wait for your call." As he walked away, Laura stood rooted to the spot, his card still in her hand. The morning sun streamed through the skylight, catching the gold embossing on the card's surface. For a moment, she could have sworn she heard her father's laugh, the one he used to share with her mother in old photographs, before cancer took him and left her with only memories and a stepmother who saw her as a burden to be managed. Ms. Vulvat, one of the installation team members, called out, "Where do you want the Klein piece?" Laura tucked the card into her portfolio and turned back to her work, pushing thoughts of Rob Key to the back of her mind. She had a job to do, a reputation to maintain, a future to build. She couldn't afford distractions, no matter how intriguing they might be. But as she directed the placement of paintings and adjusted lighting levels, she found her thoughts drifting back to those gold-flecked eyes and the way they'd lit up when discussing her work. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as a curiosity or a diversity hire or her stepmother's burden, but as herself. The card seemed to burn in her portfolio throughout the day, a promise and a warning all at once. By closing time, her fingers had memorized its edges, and she'd made her decision. Sometimes, destiny arrived in unexpected moments, wearing a bespoke suit and carrying art magazines at 3 a.m. Little did Laura know, as she finally pulled out her phone to dial the number embossed in gold, that this single choice would set in motion events that would shake Manhattan's social foundations to their core, challenge everything she thought she knew about love and family, and ultimately test her strength in ways she could never have imagined. Chapter 2. Blossoming Love. The lights of Manhattan twinkled like fallen stars as Laura stood before her closet, second-guessing her decision. 3 outfits lay discarded on her bed in her modest Brooklyn apartment, a space she'd decorated with carefully curated vintage finds and original works from emerging artists she'd discovered. Her phone buzzed with another text from her best friend Maya. "Girl, stop overthinking and go." She finally settled on a dress that honored both her heritage and her contemporary style, a modern cut in rich burgundy fabric, adorned with subtle geometric patterns inspired by African textiles. Her mother's delicate gold earrings completed the look, tiny sculptures that caught the light as she moved. The familiar weight of them gave her courage. Le Petit Jardin was unlike any restaurant Laura had ever entered. Tucked away in a historic village brownstone, its garden dining room felt like stepping into a secret world. Rob waited by the entrance, his usual power suit replaced by a cashmere sweater that made him look younger, more vulnerable somehow. "You look stunning," he said softly, his eyes taking in every detail of her appearance with genuine appreciation. No subtle double-takes, no masked surprise, just pure admiration that made her cheeks warm. The maitre d' led them to a secluded table surrounded by climbing roses and twinkling lights. Laura noticed how Rob pulled out her chair without flourish, as if consideration was simply part of who he was rather than a show he was putting on. "I have a confession to make," Rob said as they settled in. "I didn't just happen to be at the gallery that morning." He looked almost sheepish. "I'd read every article you'd written. I'd been following your curatorial work for months. That installation was just the excuse I needed to finally meet you." Laura's hand froze halfway to her water glass. "Why?" "Because you see the world differently. You're writing about art. It's not just analysis. You understand the soul of each piece, how it connects to the human experience. I've never encountered anyone who thinks the way you do." The conversation flowed like wine after that. They discussed everything from the renaissance of black contemporary artists in New York's gallery scene to Rob's secret passion for architectural preservation. Hours slipped by unnoticed as they debated, laughed, and shared stories. "My father was an architect in Cape Town," Laura found herself saying, surprising herself by sharing something so personal. "Before we moved here, he taught me to see beauty in unexpected places." She paused, touching her mother's earrings. "After we lost him, art became my way of keeping his perspective alive." Rob reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. The touch sent electricity through her skin. "Tell me about him." And she did. She told him about Sunday mornings spent sketching buildings with her father, about his dream of designing spaces that brought communities together, about the way cancer had stolen him piece by piece until only memories remained. Rob listened with such intensity that Laura felt truly heard for the first time since her father's death. That first dinner turned into a whirlwind of encounters that defied the usual dating patterns of Manhattan's elite. Instead of charity galas and society events, Rob took her urban exploring, discovering hidden architectural gems in forgotten corners of the city. They spent one memorable afternoon sketching the ornate details of Grand Central's ceiling, lying flat on their backs on the terminal floor while commuters hurried around them. Laura introduced him to tiny gallery openings in converted warehouses where emerging artists pushed boundaries and sparked conversations. Rob absorbed everything with genuine curiosity, asking questions that showed he was truly engaging with the art rather than just trying to impress her. One rainy evening, after discovering a Byzantine-inspired mosque tucked away in an unexpected neighborhood, they found shelter in a tiny Ethiopian restaurant. Over injera and spicy stews, Rob spoke about his own father for the first time. He built his empire on luxury developments, Rob said, his voice tight. But he never understood that buildings are more than investment vehicles. They're part of the city's story, its soul. He met Laura's eyes. That's what I've been trying to change with my projects, even though it drives him crazy. I want to create spaces that bring people together, that preserve the heart of communities while helping them grow. Laura recognized the weight in his voice, the burden of carrying dreams that didn't align with family expectations. She reached across the table this time, taking his hand. They sat in understanding silence as the rain drummed against the windows. Their worlds began to merge in unexpected ways. Rob started showing up at her gallery events, engaging with artists and quietly purchasing works. From upcoming talents Laura championed. She found herself sketching ideas for community spaces that could be incorporated into his developments, her father's influence flowing through her pencil. But it wasn't all serious discussions about art and architecture. Rob had a playful side that emerged more with each passing day. He surprised her one evening by having the entire High Line cleared for a private midnight picnic, complete with a string quartet, playing contemporary arrangements of classic jazz pieces. "Dance with me," he whispered, pulling her to her feet as the musicians began a slow, haunting version of Coltrane's Naima. They swayed between carefully tended wildflowers, the city lights creating a private constellation around them. "I never expected this," Laura admitted, her head resting against his chest. "When I first saw you in that suit at the gallery, you thought I was another entitled developer coming to buy art as investment pieces?" Rob chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. "Something like that." She lifted her head to look at him. "I've never been so happy to be wrong." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. The quartet pretended not to notice, diplomatically shifting to another Coltrane piece as the couple remained lost in their own world. Their relationship deepened with each passing week. Rob began leaving clothes at her apartment, designer suits looking strangely at home next to her vintage finds. Laura's toothbrush appeared in his penthouse bathroom, her favorite tea in his kitchen cabinet. They developed small rituals, Sunday morning sketching sessions, impromptu architectural tours, late-night discussions about art and life and dreams. But shadows lurked at the edges of their happiness. Laura noticed the whispers that followed them at high-profile gallery openings, the subtle way some of Rob's business associates' smiles didn't reach their eyes when he introduced her. She caught glimpses of disapproving looks from elegant women at charity functions, heard the barely concealed surprise in their voices when they discovered she was a curator rather than an artist. Rob seemed oblivious to these undercurrents, or perhaps he simply didn't care. He proudly introduced her as the brilliant curator who's revolutionizing how we experience art, his arm warm and secure around her waist. When an elderly board member at a museum fundraiser made a pointed comment about traditional values, Rob's response was sharp and immediate, leaving no doubt about where he stood. The real storm clouds gathered quietly, building tension like a summer thunderhead. Laura's stepmother, Haley, began showing up unannounced at the gallery, her concerns about reputation and knowing one's place barely masking deeper prejudices. Rob's father, Theodore, started appearing in the society pages with quotes about maintaining family legacy and responsible succession planning. But wrapped in the cocoon of their growing love, Laura and Rob remained focused on building their shared vision. They spent countless hours in his home office, spreading out plans for his latest development project. Laura's artistic eye and community-centered perspective helped reshape the designs into something truly revolutionary, a space that would preserve historic architecture while creating affordable studios for artists and community gathering spaces. One evening, as they stood on his penthouse balcony, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and purple, Rob pulled Laura close. "I never knew love could feel like this," he whispered, wiping away the happy tears that had begun to fall from her eyes. "With you, every moment feels like the first time I'm truly seeing the world." Laura turned in his arms, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "My father used to say that love is like great architecture. It should be both beautiful and functional, designed to weather storms while lifting the spirit." "Smart man, your father." Rob smiled, but there was something serious in his eyes. "Laura, His phone buzzed, interrupting the moment. Laura saw his father's name on the screen and felt Rob tense against her. He silenced the call, but the spell was broken. Reality had intruded on their private paradise, a reminder that their love story existed in a world of complicated family dynamics and societal expectations. As they held each other under the darkening sky, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something momentous. Their love had grown into something profound and unshakable, but forces were gathering that would test its strength to the breaking point. In the coming weeks, their faith in each other would be challenged in ways neither could imagine. The whispers would grow into shouts, the disapproving looks would transform into active opposition, and their dream of building something beautiful together would be threatened by those who claimed to have their best interests at heart. But for now, in the gentle embrace of the evening, they simply held each other. The city stretched out before them like a sea of possibilities, and their love felt strong enough to weather any storm. They couldn't know that the true test of their bond was just beginning, or that their story would soon become a battlefield in a war between love and prejudice, tradition and progress, fear and hope. Chapter 3. Storm clouds gather. The first strike came on a pristine spring morning. Laura stood in her gallery space, adjusting the lighting for her groundbreaking exhibition, Voices of the Diaspora, when Maya burst through the door, tablet in hand, her braids swinging with urgency. "You need to see this," Maya said, thrusting the tablet forward. The headline blazed across the screen of the New York Social Register's website, "Key Heir's New Romance, a Calculated Career Move." Below it, a photo of Laura and Rob at their private Highline dinner, clearly taken with a long-range lens, made their intimate moment look staged and orchestrated. Laura's hands trembled as she scrolled through the article. Anonymous sources claimed she'd orchestrated their meeting at the gallery, suggesting she'd used inside information about Rob's schedule to position herself in his path. Her curatorial achievements were dismissed as fortuitous timing, implying connections rather than talent had secured her position. Her phone buzzed. Haley Matthews calling for the third time that morning. Laura silenced it, but her stepmother's words from their last conversation echoed in her mind. Did you really think they'd accept you, that they'd let someone like you into their world without a fight? The gallery door opened again, this time admitting James Henderson, his usual composed demeanor fractured by concern. "Laura, my office, now!" It wasn't a request. The walk to Henderson's office felt like traversing a minefield. Staff members quickly looked away as she passed, their silence more damning than any words. Only Glenn, the security guard, met her eyes with unwavering support. Henderson's office, usually a sanctuary of calm with its view of the park, felt suffocating. He sat heavily behind his massive desk, laying out 3 separate newspapers. Each featured variations of the same story, each more damaging than the last. "The board is concerned," Henderson began, his voice carefully neutral. "Your relationship with Rob Key has brought attention to the gallery. Some of our more conservative donors are questioning the objectivity of your curatorial decisions." Laura's spine straightened. "My work speaks for itself. The attendance numbers for my exhibitions have been exceptional," Henderson cut in. "But perception matters in our world, Laura. You know this." He slid a document across the desk. "The board suggests a temporary leave of absence. Paid, of course. Just until this situation resolves itself." The paper blurred before her eyes. "You mean until I end things with Rob?" Henderson's silence was answer enough. Laura stood, her mother's earrings catching the light like tiny flames. "My exhibition opens in 3 days. I won't abandon it." "Laura, no." Her voice carried the strength of generations who'd faced down prejudice with dignity. "I've earned my place here. If the board wants me gone, they'll have to fire me and publicly explain why." She left Henderson's office with her head high, but her hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone. Rob answered on the first ring. "I already have my legal team preparing responses," he said before she could speak. "The articles are full of actionable libel. We can—" "Rob." Her voice broke slightly. "Your father's behind this, isn't he?" The pause told her everything. "He's at the penthouse now," Rob finally said. "Says he won't leave until we talk. Laura, none of this changes anything between us. I love you." "I love you too." She took a deep breath. "Handle your father. I need to save my exhibition." The next 48 hours became a blur of battle strategies. While Rob confronted his father, Laura threw herself into perfecting every detail of her exhibition. She worked through the night, transforming the gallery space into a powerful statement about identity, heritage, and the right to exist in spaces that tried to exclude you. Maya brought her coffee and updates from social media, where the story was evolving. Some of New York's younger art critics had begun pushing back against the hit pieces, highlighting Laura's innovative curatorial work and questioning the timing of the attacks. The morning of the exhibition's preview, Laura arrived early to find Theodore Key waiting outside the gallery. His bespoke suit and carefully maintained silver hair radiated authority, but Laura saw past the facade to the desperation in his eyes. "Ms. Woolvart," he began smoothly, "I believe we got off on the wrong foot. Perhaps we could discuss this situation like reasonable people?" Laura met his gaze steadily. "Reasonable people don't plant false stories or try to destroy careers, Mr. Key. Everything I've done has been to protect my son." His mask slipped slightly, showing a flash of anger. "Rob's position comes with responsibilities, expectations. Surely you understand that your relationship complicates things unnecessarily." "The only thing complicated here is your prejudice." Laura moved to step past him, but his next words froze her in place. "The Sterling Gallery's endowment includes significant contributions from key family foundations," he said softly. "Contributions that could be redirected if the gallery continues to employ curators who generate controversial publicity." Laura turned slowly. Are you threatening my entire institution because your son loves me? I'm offering you a choice, a generous relocation package, a curator position at any gallery outside New York. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Think of your career, Ms. Woolvart. There are other cities, other opportunities. But only one Rob. Laura's laugh held no humor. You really don't know your son at all, do you? She pushed past him into the gallery, but his words followed her like poison. The threat to the gallery's funding wasn't empty. She'd seen the donor lists, knew how much influence the Key family wielded in New York's art world. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rob. Father missing. What did he do? Before she could respond, Haley Matthews swept into the gallery like an avenging angel, designer heels clicking against marble floors. I tried to warn you, she announced without preamble. Now look at the mess you've made. I'm working, Haley. Laura continued adjusting a spotlight, refusing to engage. The Keys called me. Haley's voice dripped with satisfaction. They understand our concerns about this relationship. They've offered to help us intervene. Laura's hand stilled on the lighting control. Our concerns. You've been working with them. Someone had to protect you from your own naivety. Haley moved closer, lowering her voice. Did you really think they'd let their heir throw away generations of carefully cultivated connections for a girl from Brooklyn? Love doesn't conquer all, Laura. Not in their world. The spotlight slipped, sending harsh light across the gallery. Laura watched it illuminate her carefully curated exhibition, pieces that spoke of resilience, of claiming space, of refusing to be erased. You're right, Laura said quietly, turning to face her stepmother. Love doesn't conquer all, but it gives you the strength to fight. She gestured to the artwork surrounding them. Every piece in this room tells a story of someone who refused to stay in the box society built for them. I've spent my whole career amplifying those voices. Did you really think I wouldn't recognize my own story when it became part of that narrative? Haley's carefully maintained composure cracked. You ungrateful Ms. Matthews. Rob's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He stood in the gallery entrance, his usual polished appearance showing signs of strain. I believe you were just leaving. The look Haley gave him could have frozen flame. This isn't over. No, Rob agreed, moving to stand beside Laura. It's not, but the next move is ours. After Haley's sharp exit, Laura sank into Rob's embrace, letting his strength support her for a moment. Your father offered to buy me off, she murmured against his chest. I know. He tried the same strategy with his lawyers this morning. Rob's arms tightened around her. I've already transferred control of my personal assets to protected accounts. He can't touch the projects we've been working on together. Laura pulled back to look at him. Rob, the gallery's funding is secure. I made some calls. The Modern Arts Coalition is prepared to replace any withdrawn donations, no strings attached. He smiled slightly. Apparently, they've been looking for an excuse to break the Key family's influence over New York's art scene for years. A small laugh escaped Laura, half sob and half triumph. We're really doing this? Taking on both our families, the social structure of New York, all of it? Together. Rob's voice held absolute certainty. But Laura, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Father doesn't give up easily, and now that Haley's allied with him, let them come, Laura said, drawing strength from the artwork surrounding them, pieces that spoke of survival, of love, of the power of standing your ground. We have something they don't understand. What's that? The truth. She squared her shoulders. Now help me finish setting up. The preview starts in 2 hours, and every piece needs to be perfect. As they worked side by side, adjusting lights and tweaking placements, neither noticed the figure watching from the street. phone held steady as it documented their every move. In a tasteful office across town, Theodore Key viewed the surveillance feed and smiled. Phase 1 of destroying his son's unsuitable romance had failed, but he had always excelled at playing the long game. He opened his desk drawer, removing a thick file labeled Vulvart L. Inside, carefully collected evidence waited to be deployed, some real, some manufactured, all devastating. By the time he was done, no gallery in New York would risk their reputation by associating with Laura. The storm wasn't gathering anymore. It was about to break. Chapter 4. Desperate Measures. The sound of a camera shutter whispered through the pre-dawn quiet. Laura froze at her apartment window, morning coffee halfway to her lips. There, again, the subtle click coming from somewhere across the street. Her hand trembled as she set down the cup, coffee sloshing over the rim. 3 weeks had passed since Theodore Key's failed attempt to buy her silence. Each day brought new invasions, each one calculated to erode her sense of security. The psychological warfare was as precise as it was relentless. She pulled out her phone to text Rob, then stopped. Last week, they'd discovered their phones had been compromised. Intimate conversations recorded, private messages intercepted. Now they communicated through burner phones, changing numbers frequently, like characters in a spy thriller, except this was terrifyingly real. Maya arrived unannounced, her usual vibrant energy subdued. "Found another one," she said without preamble, holding up a tiny surveillance device she'd discovered hidden in Laura's gallery office. "They're getting more sophisticated. This one could pick up conversations from 30 feet away." Laura sank onto her vintage sofa, the weight of constant surveillance pressing down like a physical force. "I keep thinking I see Theodore's private investigators everywhere," she admitted. "At the coffee shop, on the subway, outside my building. Am I getting paranoid?" "It's not paranoia if they're really watching," Maya replied grimly. She pulled out her brother's latest security scan results. "They've hacked your home Wi-Fi, your work email, even your smart TV. They're trying to map every aspect of your life." The psychological toll was becoming visible. Laura's hands shook slightly as she reviewed gallery documents. She startled at unexpected sounds, checked every room for cameras before changing clothes. Even her dreams were invaded by the sensation of being watched. Rob noticed her flinch when he touched her shoulder at the gallery that afternoon. "Laura," he said softly, "talk to me. Please." She turned into his embrace, finally letting tears fall. "I feel like I'm losing myself," she whispered. "Every move I make, every word I speak, it's all being recorded, analyzed, used against us. I can't even wear my mother's earrings anymore because I'm afraid they've hidden a microphone in my jewelry box." His arms tightened around her. "We'll move you into the penthouse. The security team—" "Already found 3 of their devices in your building's lobby," Laura interrupted. "Your father's people are always one step ahead." That evening, reviewing security footage with Detective Chen, they discovered how deep the surveillance went. Theodore's team had created a detailed map of Laura's routines, her relationships, her vulnerabilities. They knew when she got her coffee, which dry cleaner she used, even which paintings she lingered in front of during gallery walks. "This is more than just harassment," Chen observed, studying the patterns. "They're building a profile, looking for pressure points. The psychological impact of knowing you're being watched is just phase 1. Laura's nightmares grew more vivid. She dreamed of eyes in the walls, of cameras sprouting like deadly flowers, of Theodore Key's voice whispering through hidden speakers about knowing her place. She woke, gasping, sheets tangled around her legs, the night pressing in with suffocating weight. Rob found her one morning at 3 a.m., standing in her gallery space, surrounded by the art she'd curated, pieces about resistance, about claiming space, about refusing to be erased. "I won't let them make me invisible," she said as he approached. "They're trying to shrink my world, make me doubt myself, make me afraid to take up space. But this—" She gestured to the artwork around them. "This is who I am. They can watch every move I make, but they can't take my voice." Her defiance sparked something in Rob. The next day, he launched a counter-offensive, hiring ethical hackers to trace the surveillance back to its source. They discovered a network of shell companies, all leading back to key enterprises. "Father's getting sloppy," Rob noted, reviewing the evidence. "He's so focused on controlling the narrative that he's leaving traces." But Theodore's team adapted quickly. The direct surveillance was replaced by more insidious methods. Laura discovered her gallery interns had been paid to report her conversations. Society friends suddenly cancelled plans, their excuses hollow. Even her favorite coffee shop owner started watching her with wary eyes. "They're trying to isolate you," Maya realized. "Make you feel like there's nowhere safe, no one you can trust." The pressure began affecting Laura's work. Her hands shook as she hung paintings, wondering if each client was another of Theodore's spies. She found herself second-guessing every decision, every interaction haunted by the knowledge that unseen eyes were judging, recording, waiting for her to break. One afternoon, she found Hayley Matthews in her office, examining a surveillance device with calculated interest. "It doesn't have to be this way," her stepmother said smoothly. "Just step away from Rob. Let things return to normal." "Normal?" Laura's laugh held no humor. "You mean go back to knowing my place? To making myself small enough for people like you and Theodore to feel comfortable?" "We're trying to protect you both," Hayley insisted. "This relationship can only end in pain." "No," Laura replied, her voice finding new strength. "You're trying to protect your own power, your own prejudices. But here's what you don't understand. Every camera you hide, every phone you tap, every person you turn against us just proves how afraid you are of what our love represents." That night, in Rob's penthouse, they made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden in his father's private server, they found evidence that the surveillance wasn't just about control, it was preparation for something worse. "They're building a case," Detective Chen confirmed, reviewing the files. "Creating a narrative about obsession, manipulation, unstable behavior. They're setting up a scenario where if something happens to you, Laura, Rob becomes the prime suspect." The realization hit like a physical blow. Theodore wasn't just trying to break them apart. He was creating a framework for something far more sinister. The surveillance wasn't just invasion, it was ammunition. Laura stood at the penthouse windows, looking out at the city that had become both home and battleground. The weight of being watched had changed her, but not in the way Theodore intended. Instead of breaking her, it had forged her into something stronger. "We need to be ready," she said, turning to Rob and Chen. "Whatever they're planning, it's coming soon, and when it does—" A quiet beep interrupted her. Maya's brother, monitoring the penthouse's security systems, sent an urgent alert. New devices had been detected, more sophisticated than anything they'd seen before. The watchers were closing in. Laura touched her mother's earrings, drawing strength from generations of women who had refused to be silenced. "Let them watch," she said finally. "Let them see exactly who we are and what we're capable of." But even as she spoke, shadows moved in the building across the street. Camera lenses glinted in the darkness. And somewhere, Theodore Key reviewed surveillance footage, planning his next move in a game where the stakes were not just love, but survival itself. Chapter 5. The Disappearance. The April rain fell in crystalline sheets across Manhattan, transforming the city lights into watercolor smears. Laura stood at the penthouse windows, her reflection ghost-like against the storm beyond. 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation with Theodore and Hayley, 3 weeks of uneasy peace that felt more like the eye of a hurricane than actual respite. "The security team's changing shifts," Rob said from behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Thomas will be downstairs until morning. Try to get some sleep." Laura leaned back against him, taking comfort in his solid presence. "I need to finish the catalogue notes for next month's exhibition. The printer's deadline can wait until tomorrow." Rob pressed a kiss to her temple. "You've been working non-stop." He was right. Since moving into the penthouse, Laura had thrown herself into her work with almost frantic intensity, as if proving her professional worth could somehow justify the chaos their love had unleashed. The Sterling Gallery board had backed down from their threats after Rob's counterattack, but Laura felt the weight of their scrutiny in every decision, every installation choice. "One more hour," she promised, turning to kiss him properly. "Go to bed, I'll join you soon." Rob studied her face for a moment, concern evident in his eyes. "1 hour," he agreed finally. "Then I'm coming back to carry you to bed if necessary." Laura watched him disappear down the hallway toward their bedroom, love and gratitude welling in her chest. Despite everything, the threats, the surveillance, the constant pressure, Rob's support had never wavered. Turning back to her laptop, Laura immersed herself in the exhibition catalogue. The show, featuring emerging artists exploring themes of identity and resistance, felt personally relevant in ways she hadn't anticipated when planning it months ago. The storm intensified, rain drumming against the windows like urgent fingers. Laura was so focused on her work that she almost missed the first sign something was wrong. A subtle shift in the air pressure, as if a door had opened somewhere in the apartment. She looked up, listening. The penthouse was silent except for the rain and the distant hum of the city. Still, something felt off. Laura saved her work and stood, moving quietly toward the hallway. "Rob," she called softly. No answer. The security panel by the elevator showed all systems normal, but Laura's skin prickled with unease. She pulled out her phone, finger hovering over the security team's number. The blow came from behind, quick and precise. Laura felt a sharp sting in her neck as she tried to turn, tried to scream. The phone slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers as darkness crowded the edges of her vision. Her last conscious thought was of Rob, sleeping peacefully down the hall, unaware that their enemies had finally made their move. Rob woke to silence. No laptop keys clicking, no quiet humming as Laura worked. He checked the time. 2:47 a.m. She should have come to bed nearly 2 hours ago. "Laura?" He padded into the living room, expecting to find her asleep over her laptop, as had happened before. Instead, he found an empty room, her computer closed and dark. The first tendril of fear curled through his gut. He checked the bathroom, the kitchen, the small home office they shared. Nothing. No note, no sign of where she'd gone. He was reaching for his phone when he saw it. A single, golden earring on the floor near the elevator. One of the pair that had belonged to Laura's mother, that she wore every day like armor. Rob's hands shook as he picked it up. The security panel showed no alerts, no unauthorized access. But when he tried to call down to the lobby, there was no answer. His phone showed no service, the Wi-Fi was down, and the landline was dead. Rob ran for the stairs, taking them 2 at a time down 60 flights. He found Thomas, the night security guard, slumped unconscious in the lobby. The security cameras were dark, their memory cards missing. What followed was a nightmare of police interviews and desperate searches. Laura had vanished completely, leaving behind only her mother's earring and 1,000 unanswered questions. The police, initially skeptical, became more interested when they learned of the previous surveillance and harassment. Detective Rose, a veteran of the Major Crimes Unit, took particular interest in the case. The level of sophistication involved here is remarkable, she told Rob as they reviewed security footage from neighboring buildings. They knew exactly how to disable your systems, how to avoid leaving traces. This wasn't random. Rob barely heard her. He was focused on the last image of Laura captured on camera, standing at the penthouse window, her silhouette haloed by city lights. Had she sensed what was coming? Had she been afraid in those final moments? Haley Matthews arrived at the police station in a show of concern that fooled no one. "This is terrible," she declared, dabbing at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "I warned her that the art world could be dangerous, all those late nights alone at the gallery." "My father," Rob interrupted, voice raw with fury. "Where is he?" "Theodore Key is currently in London for business meetings," Detective Chen reported. "We've confirmed his arrival there 2 days ago. That doesn't mean anything. He has resources, connections. Mr. Key." Chen's voice was gentle but firm. "We're pursuing all possibilities, but right now we need to focus on any enemies Ms. Woolvart might have made through her work. Former artists she rejected, collectors she might have offended." Rob wanted to scream. They were wasting time chasing false leads while Theodore's real plan unfolded. He was sure his father was behind this, the precision of the operation, the complete communication blackout, the way all evidence had been carefully eliminated. Maya arrived like an avenging angel, bringing Laura's personal files and a determination that matched Rob's own. "The gallery," she said immediately. "We need to check her office." Laura kept a private journal in her desk, one she never digitized because she was worried about surveillance. They found the office door unlocked, papers scattered across the floor as if someone had searched it in a hurry. The journal was gone, but Maya's sharp eyes caught something else, a tiny SD card taped under Laura's desk drawer. Rob's hands trembled as they viewed its contents on Maya's laptop. Video files, dozens of them, showing Laura being followed over the past month. Photos of meetings between Theodore Key and unknown men. Audio recordings of phone calls discussing removal and containment. "She was gathering evidence," Maya whispered, "building a case against them. And they found out." Rob's voice was hollow. "This is my fault. I pushed too hard with the corporate blackmail, made him desperate." "No." Maya gripped his arm. "This is on them, and we're going to find her." But as days stretched into weeks, hope began to fade. The police investigation stalled, running into dead ends and mysterious roadblocks. Theodore Key returned from London, expressing appropriate concern while subtly suggesting that Laura might have engineered her own disappearance for publicity. Rob threw himself into the search, hiring private investigators and offering rewards that made headlines. He called in every favor, leveraged every connection, but it was like Laura had vanished into thin air. The art world buzzed with theories and speculation. Some suggested Laura had cracked under the pressure of her position and fled. Others whispered about darker possibilities, revenge from rejected artists, jealous collectors, even organized crime connections. Only Rob, Maya, and a handful of others knew the truth, that somewhere out there Laura was being held against her will, a pawn in Theodore Key's ruthless game of control and power. In a secure room far from Manhattan, Laura herself was slowly regaining consciousness. The drug they'd used had left her disoriented, but her mind was finally clearing. She found herself in a luxuriously appointed bedroom, comfortable but with windows that wouldn't open and doors that locked from the outside. On the bedside table, she found a note in Theodore Key's elegant handwriting. "This is for your own good and Robert's. Cooperate, and this will all be over soon." Laura touched her bare earlobe where her mother's earring should have been, feeling its absence like a physical pain. But as she explored her prison, testing doors and studying sightlines, her fear began to transform into something else. A cold, calculated anger. They thought they could break her, use her as leverage to control Rob. They didn't understand that surviving Haley's subtle cruelties had taught her patience, that building her career despite constant prejudice had given her steel beneath her grace. Most importantly, they didn't know about the tiny tracker she'd sewn into her jacket's lining weeks ago after first suspecting she was being followed. A tracker whose twin was hidden in Rob's office, waiting to be discovered. Laura sat on the edge of the too-soft bed, closed her eyes, and began to plan. They wanted her to be a victim, a cautionary tale about knowing her place. Instead, she would become something far more dangerous. A woman with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. In his Manhattan penthouse, Rob stared at Laura's laptop, now examined and re-examined for clues. He didn't notice the small package that had been slipped under his door, containing a single sheet of paper with coordinates and a message in Laura's distinctive handwriting: "Trust no one. Find the tracker. Hurry." The game wasn't over. It was merely entering its most dangerous phase. Chapter 6. Trial and Tribulation. The Manhattan Criminal Court loomed against a slate-grey sky, its limestone facade a testament to justice that often favored the powerful. Rob straightened his tie, ignoring the barrage of camera flashes as he climbed the steps. 8 weeks had passed since Laura's disappearance, and today he would face the charges that Theodore Key had masterfully orchestrated against him. Detective Chen caught his arm just before he reached the doors. "They've rushed this to trial," she muttered, her usually composed features tight with concern. "Someone's pulling strings to fast-track the proceedings." "My father's work," Rob replied grimly. "He wants this over before—" He stopped himself, but Chen's sharp eyes narrowed. "Before what, Mr. Key? What aren't you telling me?" Rob thought of the tracker hidden in his office, of the coordinates that had led nowhere, of Maya's increasingly complex web of conspiracy theories. But he couldn't risk sharing their suspicions, not when they still didn't know who to trust. Inside the courtroom, Judge Marizanne Mooney presided with an air of contained fury. She was known for her zero-tolerance policy toward corruption, and the case before her reeked of manipulation. The prosecution had painted Rob as an obsessive stalker who had orchestrated Laura's disappearance when she tried to end their relationship. The evidence seemed overwhelming. Doctored security footage showing Rob arguing with Laura, manufactured emails suggesting a pattern of controlling behavior, even witnesses who claimed to have seen him threatening her at gallery events. Theodore Key had spent weeks building this elaborate fiction, using his connections to create a perfect trap. "The prosecution calls Haley Matthews," announced District Attorney Wilson, a man whose political ambitions were well known and whose campaigns had been generously funded by Key Enterprises. Haley took the stand in elegant mourning clothes, every inch the grieving stepmother. "I saw the signs," she testified, dabbing at her eyes. "Laura was afraid, but she wouldn't admit it. She said Rob would ruin her career if she left him." Rob's attorney, Jessica Patel, rose for cross-examination. She was young for a defense lawyer, but her reputation for dismantling carefully constructed lies had made her Rob's first choice. "Ms. Matthews," Jessica began, her voice deceptively gentle, "could you explain why you met with Theodore Key 17 times in the month before Laura's disappearance?" Haley's composure flickered. "Mr. Key was concerned about his son's welfare, and these concerns led you to hire private investigators to follow Laura, to install surveillance equipment in her apartment." "Objection!" D.A. Wilson shot to his feet. "Counsel is making unfounded accusations." "Overruled," Judge Mooney interjected, "but tread carefully, Ms. Patel." Jessica produced a series of photographs. Haley meeting with known surveillance experts, Theodore Key entering Laura's building late at night, bank transfers to shell companies known for corporate espionage. "Ms. Matthews," Jessica continued, "would you care to explain these?" Before Haley could respond, a commotion erupted at the courtroom doors. Maya burst in, ignoring the bailiff's attempts to stop her. "Your Honor," she called out, "new evidence has just—" "Order!" Judge Mooney's gavel crashed down. "Young woman, this is highly irregular. The tracker!" Maya held up her phone. "It's active again. We know where Laura is." The courtroom erupted in chaos. Rob started toward Maya, but bailiffs blocked his path. Detective Chen was already on her phone, barking orders. Through it all, Rob noticed his father slip quietly from the gallery, phone in hand. Judge Mooney's voice cut through the pandemonium. "Clear the court. We will reconvene tomorrow morning." Her eyes met Rob's. "Mr. Key, I suggest you and your counsel make good use of this recess." Outside, Maya pulled Rob and Jessica into an alcove, away from the press. "The signal's coming from a property in the Berkshires," she whispered. "An old estate owned by—" "A Key family shell corporation," Rob finished. "I know it. Father used it for discreet business meetings when I was growing up." Jessica's fingers flew over her tablet. "I can have a search warrant within the hour. Detective Chen—" "No," Rob's voice was firm. "We do this carefully. Father will have contingencies in place. One wrong move and Laura could disappear again, or worse." They gathered in Rob's penthouse, now swept clean of surveillance devices. Detective Chen brought in a trusted team, and Maya's brother provided technical support. Together, they began planning a rescue operation that had to succeed on the first try. "The estate has extensive security," Rob explained, pulling up blueprints he'd had Maya hack from his father's private server. "Guards, cameras, motion sensors. Father used it to house sensitive corporate assets." "And now he's housing a person," Chen said grimly. "That changes the legal dynamics significantly." As they strategized into the night, Rob couldn't shake the memory of Haley's testimony. Something about her performance had seemed off. Not just rehearsed, but almost reluctant. Was it possible she was having doubts about her role in this scheme? His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Greenhouse. Midnight. Come alone or she dies." Attached was a photo of Laura, clearly taken recently, reading a book in what looked like an upscale prison. Rob's hands shook as he showed the message to the others. "It's a trap," Chen said immediately. "They're trying to lure you out." "Of course it's a trap," Rob agreed. "But it's also an opportunity. They don't know we've traced the tracker. They don't know how much evidence we've gathered." Jessica was already drafting emergency motions. "If we can prove they're holding Laura against her will, everything else falls apart. The criminal charges, the character assassination, all of it." "I'm going to the greenhouse," Rob announced, "but not alone and not unprepared." The plan came together quickly. While Rob appeared to follow the kidnapper's instructions, Chen's team would move on the Berkshire's estate. Maya's brother would hack the security systems, using Theodore's own corporate passwords against him, and Jessica would prepare to return to court with evidence that would destroy the prosecution's case. At 11:30, Rob stepped into the elaborate greenhouse attached to his father's Manhattan mansion. The space had been his mother's pride and joy before her death, and Theodore had maintained it as a shrine to her memory. Now it would become the setting for a different kind of remembrance. "I knew you'd come." Theodore Key stepped from behind a massive orchid display. "You always were predictably sentimental." "Where is she?" Rob demanded. "Safe, comfortable, which is more than she deserves after how she's corrupted you." Theodore moved closer, his expensive shoes clicking against the greenhouse tiles. "This ends tonight, Robert. You'll sign over your voting shares, resign your position, and allow yourself to be checked into a private facility for exhaustion. In return, Laura will be released unharmed, somewhere far from New York. And if I refuse, then the woman you love disappears forever, and you spend the next decade in prison for her murder." Theodore's smile was cold. "I've arranged everything. The evidence, the witnesses, even the judge who'll handle the eventual appeal. You taught me that, son. Always be thorough. What Theodore didn't know was that every word was being recorded, transmitted to multiple secure locations. That Detective Chen's team was already breaching the Berkshires estate. That Laura, brilliant and resourceful, had spent weeks gathering evidence of her own captivity. But most importantly, Theodore didn't know about the figure silently approaching behind him. Haley Matthews, her face set with determination, holding her phone up to capture every damning word. The greenhouse exploded with activity. Police officers emerged from hiding places behind exotic plants. Theodore's face contorted with fury as he realized his perfect plan was unraveling. "You've destroyed everything," he snarled at Rob. "Our legacy, our family name." "No, father," Rob interrupted. "You did that yourself. Every illegal action, every manipulated piece of evidence, every attempt to control through fear and power, it was all you." As Theodore was led away in handcuffs, Rob's phone lit up with a message from Chen. "Estate secured, Laura safe, coming home." The next morning, the courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Judge Mooney sat stone-faced as she reviewed the new evidence, recordings of Theodore's confession, documentation of Laura's captivity, witness statements from estate staff who'd been paid to keep her imprisoned. But the most damaging testimony came from Haley Matthews. She returned to the stand, this time speaking truth instead of scripted lies. She detailed how Theodore had manipulated her, playing on her prejudices and fears to turn her against her own stepdaughter. "I was wrong," Haley admitted, looking directly at Rob. "About everything. About you, about Laura, about what makes a person worthy of love and respect." Laura sat in the gallery, her head held high, wearing both of her mother's earrings again. Despite weeks of captivity, she radiated strength and dignity. When Judge Mooney dismissed all charges against Rob, Laura's smile lit up the courtroom. Outside on the courthouse steps, as reporters clamored for statements, Rob pulled Laura close. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered. "Never," she replied, her voice fierce. "They never understood. Trying to break us only made us stronger." Above them, the grey sky finally broke, letting through beams of sunlight that felt like a promise of better days ahead. But both Rob and Laura knew this was just one battle won in a longer war against prejudice and power. They had exposed the darkness lurking behind polite society's masks, and there would be consequences. Yet as they faced the cameras together, their hands clasped tightly, they were ready for whatever came next. They had faced the worst their families and society could throw at them, and emerged stronger, their love tested and proven in ways that left no room for doubt. Theodore Key might have lost his freedom, but he had given them something invaluable in return, the certainty that their love could withstand any storm, overcome any obstacle, and emerge triumphant against all odds. Chapter 7. Truth Prevails. The morning sun streamed through the Sterling Gallery's skylights, casting prismatic patterns across the marble floors. Laura stood in the center of the main exhibition space, surrounded by the partially installed works for her newest show, Unbound, Breaking Chains of Prejudice Through Art. Each piece had been carefully chosen to tell a story of resistance, resilience, and triumph over systemic oppression. 3 months had passed since the dramatic courtroom confrontation. Theodore Key's empire was crumbling under federal investigation, his carefully constructed world of privilege and power exposed as a house of cards built on corruption and prejudice. He awaited trial on multiple charges, including kidnapping, conspiracy, and corporate fraud. "The lighting needs to be adjusted 3 degrees west," Laura called out to her installation team. Her voice carried the same quiet authority it always had, but now there was an added layer of steel beneath the velvet, the kind of strength that came from surviving attempts to break you. Maya appeared at her side, tablet in hand. The Times wants an exclusive interview about the exhibition. They're particularly interested in how your personal experience influenced the curation. Laura considered this as she moved to adjust a sculpture's position. The piece, a powerful work by an emerging artist from South Africa, featured broken chains transformed into blooming flowers. Set it up, she decided, but make it clear. This isn't about me. It's about every voice that's been silenced, every dream that's been dismissed, every person who's been told they don't belong in spaces like this. The gallery had undergone its own transformation. After the truth about Theodore's manipulation came to light, the board had been forced to confront its own biases. Laura's position was not only secured, but elevated. She was now the youngest executive curator in the gallery's history. More importantly, she had used her new influence to implement programs supporting diverse artists and creating pathways for underrepresented voices in the art world. Her phone buzzed with a message from Rob. "Meeting with the foundation board running long. Save me." Laura smiled, remembering the day they'd conceived the Key Woolvart Foundation. It had been a week after the trial, sitting in their penthouse, surrounded by press clippings and court documents. Rather than try to bury the painful story, they had decided to transform it into something powerful. "Can't save you," she texted back, "but I'll make it worth your while when you finish. Dinner at that Ethiopian place you love?" The reply was immediate. "Now I'll definitely hurry." As she slipped her phone away, Laura caught sight of a familiar figure hovering near the gallery entrance. Hayley Matthews stood uncertainly in her designer suit, looking both elegant and somehow diminished. Their relationship had been complicated since the trial. Hayley's testimony had helped expose Theodore's schemes, but years of subtle cruelty and dismissal couldn't be erased by one moment of truth. They were trying, though. Awkward lunches, careful conversations, small steps toward understanding. "The new installation looks powerful," Hayley said as Laura approached. She gestured to a photograph series depicting various hands breaking through barriers. "These remind me of you. That day in court, when you walked in." "Why are you here, Hayley?" Laura kept her voice gentle but firm. Hayley's perfectly manicured hands twisted together. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of learning. The Foundation's educational programs about systemic bias and privilege, I've been attending them, anonymously at first, but—" She took a deep breath. "I want to help, really help, not just make grand gestures. I thought maybe I could volunteer with the youth art program." Laura studied her stepmother's face, looking for any trace of the old condescension or manipulation. Instead, she saw something new, genuine humility and a desire to change. "The program requires a 6-month commitment," Laura said finally. 2 evenings a week, working with kids who've never been inside a gallery before. Kids who might remind you of all the things you used to fear and judge. "I know." Hayley met her gaze steadily. "I'm ready to do the work." Before Laura could respond, Rob's voice rang out across the gallery. "Sorry I'm late." The board finally agreed to expand the scholarship program and— He stopped short at the sight of Hayley. Despite her testimony helping to free him, their interactions had been minimal. "Ms. Matthews was just volunteering for the youth program," Laura explained, watching Rob's expression carefully. Understanding flickered across his features. Rob had shown her, through months of loving support, that people could surprise you, not just with their capacity for cruelty, but with their potential for growth. "We could use the help," he said simply, "especially with the new satellite program opening in Brooklyn." The tension eased slightly. Hayley dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, careful not to smudge her makeup. "Thank you, both of you. I know I haven't earned your trust yet, but—" "Trust is built through actions," Laura said, echoing words her father had once told her. "Day by day, choice by choice." The moment was interrupted by Maya rushing over with urgent news. "You need to see this," she said, thrusting her tablet forward. On the screen, a breaking news alert announced that Theodore Key had agreed to a plea deal. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he would provide evidence of widespread corruption in New York's real estate and art worlds. "He's trying to drag everyone down with him," Rob said grimly. "No," Laura corrected, taking his hand. "He's finally telling the truth, even if it's for the wrong reasons. That matters." They gathered in Rob's office later that evening, along with Maya and Detective Chen, who had become a close friend through their ordeal. The Ethiopian restaurant would have to wait. They had work to do. "Theodore's plea deal will expose dozens of corrupt players," Chen explained, spreading files across Rob's desk. "Gallery owners who laundered money through art sales, developers who bribed officials for permits, board members who traded favors and influence. The old guard is falling," Maya added, her eyes bright with possibility. "This is our chance to rebuild these institutions from the ground up." Laura moved to the window, watching the city lights flicker to life as dusk settled over Manhattan. The view reminded her of that first night in the penthouse, when she'd stood in almost this exact spot, unaware of the storms gathering around them. But she was different now. They all were. The trials they'd faced had stripped away pretenses, forced confrontations with uncomfortable truths, and ultimately revealed the possibility of transformation. "We'll need to protect the foundation," Rob said, coming to stand beside her. "Make sure none of the fallout touches the programs we've built." "And the gallery," Haley added softly from her corner. "The youth programs, the emerging artist initiatives. They're too important to lose." Laura turned to face the room, these people who had played such different roles in her story. Maya, her unwavering supporter. Chen, who had never stopped seeking truth. Haley, struggling toward redemption. And Rob, whose love had remained constant through every storm. "Then we get to work," she declared. "We use this moment to create real change, not just in galleries and boardrooms, but in the ways people think and act and judge." Rob squeezed her hand, understanding as always. "Together." "Together," Laura affirmed, touching her mother's earrings for luck. "And this time, we're not fighting against something. We're fighting for something. That makes all the difference." As they began planning their response to Theodore's revelations, Laura felt a sense of purpose stronger than any fear or doubt. They had survived attempts to break them through force, and now they would face the subtler challenges of creating lasting change. The sun had fully set over Manhattan, but the city glowed with possibility. In galleries and offices, classrooms and studios, people were creating, learning, growing. And in this room, a small group of people who had been transformed by love and truth were planning a revolution, not with weapons or violence, but with art and education and unwavering hope. The old world of privilege and prejudice was crumbling. Something new and beautiful would rise in its place, built on foundations of truth, justice, and the unshakable power of love that refuses to be bound by society's chains. Chapter 8. Justice and Redemption. The federal courthouse buzzed with tension as Theodore Key was led in for sentencing. 6 months of investigations had uncovered a web of corruption that reached into every corner of New York's elite society. Today, the man who had once ruled that society through fear and influence would learn his fate. Laura sat in the gallery between Rob and Maya, her back straight, her expression composed. She wore a tailored suit in deep purple, a color of royalty and power, with her mother's earrings catching the light. The press had dubbed her the art world's champion of change, after her testimony helped expose decades of discrimination and backdoor dealings in New York's prestigious galleries. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Mooney entered. She had specifically requested to handle Theodore's sentencing, having seen firsthand how his actions had nearly destroyed 2 young lives. Theodore stood at the defendant's table, his expensive suit hanging oddly loose on his frame. 6 months in custody while awaiting sentencing had stripped away his aura of invincibility. His eyes, when they briefly met Rob's, held something new, uncertainty, perhaps even regret. "Mr. Key," Judge Mooney began, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed courtroom, "your plea agreement has indeed provided valuable assistance to ongoing investigations. However, the severity of your crimes cannot be overlooked." She detailed the charges: kidnapping, conspiracy, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and more. Each count represented another thread in the tapestry of privilege and prejudice Theodore had woven throughout his life. "Beyond the legal violations," Mooney continued, "your actions revealed a deeper moral corruption. You attempted to destroy 2 promising young people simply because their love didn't fit your narrow view of acceptability." Laura felt Rob's hand tighten around hers as his father received his sentence. 6 months already served, plus 5 years in a minimum security facility. The relatively light sentence reflected his cooperation, but the judgment in Mooney's voice made it clear that his real punishment would be living with the consequences of his actions. As Theodore was led away, he paused. "Robert," he called softly. "Ms. Woolvart, I... For once words seemed to fail the great Theodore Key. "Save it for your rehabilitation program, Father," Rob replied, his voice controlled but not cruel. "Show your remorse through actions, not words." Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Laura stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "Today isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about accountability and the possibility of change. The Key Woolvart Foundation will continue its work, creating opportunities for those who have been systematically excluded from spaces of power and influence." The foundation had indeed flourished in the wake of Theodore's revelations. As corrupt networks crumbled, new pathways opened. Laura and Rob had leveraged the moment to implement real change: scholarship programs, mentorship initiatives, and funding for diverse artists and entrepreneurs. Back at the Sterling Gallery, Laura found Haley in the Education Center, helping a group of young artists prepare for their first exhibition. Her stepmother had surprised everyone with her dedication to the youth program, gradually transforming from a society matron into a passionate advocate for arts education. "How did it go?" Haley asked quietly, after ensuring her students were absorbed in their work. 5 years, Laura replied, with conditions about continuing to cooperate with ongoing investigations. Haley nodded, her eyes distant. "I keep thinking about all the times I could have chosen differently. All the moments I let fear and prejudice guide my actions instead of love." "The past shapes us," Laura said, watching a young girl carefully apply paint to canvas, her face intense with concentration. "But it doesn't have to define us." The gallery itself stood as testament to that truth. Under Laura's leadership, it had transformed from an exclusive bastion of traditional power into a vibrant space for diverse voices and perspectives. The current exhibition, Breaking Chains, featured artists from backgrounds that would have been systematically excluded just a year ago. That evening, Laura and Rob hosted a small gathering in their penthouse. Maya was there with her new girlfriend, a brilliant curator from London. Detective Chen arrived with news about ongoing investigations. Even Henderson, the gallery director who had once suggested Laura take a leave of absence, attended with his wife. As conversations flowed and connections formed, Laura found herself on the balcony, gazing at the city lights. Rob joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist, just as he had that fateful night before her kidnapping. "Penny, for your thoughts," he murmured against her hair. "I was thinking about legacy," Laura replied. "Not the kind your father tried to preserve, but the kind we're building. Every young artist who sees themselves represented in a major gallery. Every student who realizes their dreams, aren't limited by their background. That's a legacy worth fighting for. Rob turned her to face him. And speaking of fighting for things that matter, he dropped to one knee, producing a ring that combined traditional elegance with contemporary design. Laura Vulvart, will you marry me? Laura's laugh was bright with joy and unshed tears. You really want to make headlines again? I want to spend my life building something beautiful with you, Rob answered seriously. Whatever storms come, we face them together. Yes, Laura said simply, pulling him to his feet and into a kiss that promised forever. Their guests erupted in cheers, Maya's whistle particularly piercing. But Laura and Rob remained lost in their moment, the city lights creating a private constellation around them. Later, after their friends had gone and the night was quiet, they sat together planning their future. Not just their wedding, but their ongoing work, new programs for the foundation, expanded initiatives for the gallery, ways to ensure that their story helped create lasting change. We should invite him, Laura said suddenly. Who? Your father. To the wedding. She met Rob's surprised look steadily. Not because he deserves it, but because we're building a world where love triumphs over hate. We should live that truth, even when it's difficult. Rob was quiet for a long moment. You're remarkable, you know that? I know, Laura smiled, touching her mother's earrings. And so are you. We've turned our trials into triumph, our pain into purpose. That's what real power looks like. The night deepened around them, but neither moved to turn on more lights. They sat together in the gentle darkness, planning their wedding, their future, their shared mission to create change. Outside their windows, Manhattan glittered like a sea of possibilities. Their love story had become more than just a romance. It was a catalyst for transformation, a testament to the power of standing firm in one's truth. They had faced down prejudice and corruption, not just surviving but emerging stronger, ready to help others break free from society's chains. As they finally prepared for bed, Laura paused by the window. The city that had once seemed so hostile to their love now felt full of promise. They had changed it, and it had changed them, and somewhere in that transformation, they had found their true purpose. Ready? Rob called from the bedroom. Ready, Laura answered, turning away from the view. They had work to do tomorrow, and the day after, and for all the days to come, but they would do it together. Their love a beacon, lighting the way toward a more just and beautiful world. Chapter 9. Hearts Heal. The Sterling Gallery hummed with quiet energy as Laura finalized the installation for her most personal exhibition yet, Healing Hearts, Art as Transformation. The show would feature works created through collaboration between youth program participants and reformed executives from their foundation's rehabilitation initiative, including several pieces guided by Theodore Key during his time in prison. She stood before a particularly powerful installation, a massive wall of broken mirrors, each shard carefully reconstructed to form a new image. When viewed from different angles, the piece transformed from showing chains and barriers to revealing bridges and open doors. The artist, a 16-year-old girl from Brooklyn, had worked alongside a former corporate lawyer who'd been implicated in Theodore's corrupt dealings. It's about perspective, the young artist had explained during installation. How the same pieces can create prison walls or pathways to freedom, depending on how you choose to arrange them. Rob found Laura lost in contemplation before the piece. Just got off the phone with Father's counselor, he said softly, wrapping his arms around her waist. They're recommending early release based on his extraordinary progress in the rehabilitation program. Laura leaned back against him, both their reflections multiplied infinitely in the mirror fragments. How do you feel about that? Honestly, terrified, hopeful, confused? Rob's voice carried the weight of complicated emotions. He's different in our visits now, really different. But part of me keeps waiting for the other shoe to drop. Before Laura could respond, Maya burst into the gallery, her braids swinging with urgency. "You need to see this!" She thrust her tablet forward, showing a video from the prison's art therapy program. Theodore sat with a group of incarcerated executives, his usual aristocratic manner completely absent, as he guided them through creating pieces about privilege and accountability. "I spent my life building walls," Theodore's voice came through clearly in the video. "Walls of wealth, of social position, of prejudice. I told myself I was protecting a legacy. Instead, I was imprisoning myself and trying to imprison my son in the same constructs that had limited my own humanity." Laura felt Rob's arms tighten around her as they watched his father help another inmate work through his own revelations through art. This wasn't the polished performance of a man playing a role. This was raw, genuine transformation. The exhibition opening drew unprecedented crowds. Society figures mixed with community members, established artists engaged with emerging talents, and reformed executives stood proudly beside their collaborative works. The energy in the gallery crackled with possibility. Hayley Matthews arrived early, looking both elegant and humbled. She moved through the space with new awareness, really seeing the artists and their work rather than just evaluating their social status. When she reached the mirror installation, she stood silent for a long moment. "I see myself in every broken piece," she finally said to Laura. "All the ways I let fear and prejudice shape my actions, but I also see how those same pieces can be reformed into something beautiful." The highlight of the evening came from an unexpected source. The prison had arranged a secure video link, allowing Theodore to address the gathering. His face appeared on screens throughout the gallery, no longer wearing his mask of superiority. "Art has taught me what my wealth and power never could," he began, his voice carrying new depth. "That true strength lies not in maintaining barriers, but in having the courage to break them down. Every piece in this exhibition tells a story of transformation, including my own." He turned his focus to Laura and Rob. "My son and his fiancée showed me that love isn't about preserving old structures. It's about building new ones, bridges instead of walls. Their foundation didn't just give second chances to people like me, it gave us the tools to earn those chances through honest self-reflection and genuine change." The screens showed Theodore working with other inmates, teaching them to use art as a tool for processing their crimes and their potential for redemption. The man who had once wielded power through fear now led with vulnerability and truth. Later that night, in their penthouse, Laura and Rob reviewed messages from exhibition visitors. Stories poured in from people touched by the Foundation's work, former executives finding purpose in mentoring young artists, students discovering their voices through creative expression, families healing from the wounds of prejudice and power. "Did you ever imagine," Laura mused, touching her mother's earrings, "that our love story would create all this?" Rob pulled her close, both of them silhouetted against the city lights. "You taught me that love isn't just about two people. It's about creating ripples of change that touch countless lives." A message arrived from Theodore's counselor. The parole board had approved his early release, citing his extraordinary commitment to rehabilitation and positive influence on other inmates. The news carried both promise and challenge. Maya organized a private dinner to discuss next steps. The Foundation's board members, program directors, and key supporters gathered to plan how Theodore's experience could enhance their rehabilitation initiatives. "He wants to establish a new program," Rob explained, sharing his father's proposal, "using art therapy and mindfulness to help corporate leaders recognize and transform toxic patterns of privilege and power." Detective Chen, who had become a close friend and advisor, nodded thoughtfully. "The federal prosecutor's office is interested in incorporating similar programs into their sentencing recommendations for white-collar crimes." As the discussion continued, Laura slipped away to the balcony. The city stretched before her, a canvas of infinite possibility. She remembered standing in this same spot months ago, terrified of the forces aligned against their love. Now those very forces were being transformed into tools for positive change. Haley joined her, offering a cup of tea. They stood in comfortable silence. Their relationship evolved from antagonism to cautious hope. The youth program students want to create something special for the wedding, Haley finally said. A collaborative piece about love's power to transform lives. They've asked Theodore to contribute from prison, said his story helps them believe in the possibility of real change. Laura felt tears prick her eyes, thinking of how far they'd all come. Her father had always told her that love was the most powerful force for transformation, but she'd never fully understood until now. Rob appeared in the doorway, his face bright with excitement. Father's counselor just sent his latest artwork. You need to see this. The piece was stunning, a self-portrait unlike anything Theodore had created before. It showed him not as the powerful figure he'd once been, but as a man in process, his form emerging from broken chains, reaching toward light. He's titled it, Learning to See, Rob said softly. It's his wedding gift to us. Laura studied the painting, seeing in its honest vulnerability all the possibility for healing and growth that their love had unleashed. They had done more than survive attempts to break them. They had transformed those very attempts into opportunities for profound change. The city lights sparkled like stars as they planned the next phase of their work. Their wedding would be more than a celebration of their love. It would be a testament to love's power to heal hearts, break chains, and create new worlds of possibility. "Ready?" Rob asked, pulling Laura close as their guests began to leave. "For whatever comes next." "Always," she replied, touching her mother's earrings. "Together we can transform anything." And in that moment, surrounded by the evidence of hearts healed and lives changed, they knew that their love story had become something greater than themselves. A beacon of hope showing that with courage, commitment, and unwavering love, even the deepest wounds could heal, and the strongest chains could be transformed into bridges of understanding. Chapter 10. Forgiveness Blooms. The autumn air held a crisp promise as Laura stood before the gates of the Federal Correctional Facility. 6 months had passed since their visit with the wedding invitation, and today Theodore Key would walk free. The man who had once tried to destroy her relationship with Rob was about to begin his own journey of transformation. She wore a tailored ivory pantsuit that complemented her deep brown skin, a deliberate choice to show how far they'd all come from the days when Theodore had seen her only as a threat to his family's social standing. Her mother's earrings caught the morning light, reminding her of all the strength she carried within. Rob paced nearby, his usual corporate calm fractured by nervous energy. "He's changed," he muttered, more to himself than Laura. "The counselors say he's done incredible work in the rehabilitation program. But still, he's your father," Laura finished gently. "And this is real now, not just plans and promises made through prison visiting glass." The gates opened with a mechanical hum. Theodore emerged, carrying a single box of possessions. His designer suits and carefully maintained appearance had been replaced by simple clothing and humility. He stopped short at the sight of them, clearly not expecting both to be there. "I thought," he began, then seemed to gather himself. "I didn't expect you to come, Laura." "Family shows up," she replied simply. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. The drive back to Manhattan was quiet, filled with the weight of unspoken thoughts. They had arranged temporary housing for Theodore through the Foundation's rehabilitation program, a modest apartment where he could begin rebuilding his life under careful supervision. "The Foundation board meets tomorrow," Rob said as they navigated through traffic. "They're expecting you to present your ideas for the Corporate Reformation Initiative." Theodore nodded, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I've been refining the proposal, using my experience, my understanding of how power corrupts to help others recognize and change their patterns of behavior." Laura watched him in the rearview mirror, noting how he spoke without his former aristocratic affect. Prison had stripped away more than his physical freedom. It had forced him to confront the artificial constructs of privilege he'd hidden behind. At the apartment, Theodore paused before entering. Before we go any further, I need to say something." He turned to face them fully. "The words, 'I'm sorry,' feel inadequate for what I did. The hatred I carried, the pain I caused, I can never fully make amends, but I want you both to know that every day, every moment since I realized the truth of my actions, I've been working to become someone worthy of the chance you're giving me." Laura felt Rob tense beside her, decades of complicated emotions surging beneath the surface. She squeezed his hand, offering silent support. "Show us," Rob said finally. "Not with words, but with actions. That's what matters now." The next few weeks were a study in careful rebuilding. Theodore threw himself into the Foundation's work, using his intimate knowledge of corporate power structures to identify and address systemic barriers. His insights proved invaluable as they expanded their programs to other cities. The wedding preparations continued, now infused with new meaning. Theodore asked to help in small ways, offering suggestions for incorporating elements of Rob's family history in ways that celebrated growth rather than privilege, connecting them with artists interested in creating pieces for the ceremony. One evening, as they reviewed final details in the penthouse, Haley arrived with an unexpected proposal. "The youth program students want to create an installation for your wedding," she announced. "A collaborative piece about transformation and second chances." Laura watched Theodore's expression carefully as Haley explained the project. A year ago, he would have dismissed these young artists as beneath his notice. Now he listened intently, offering thoughtful questions about their vision. "They're remarkably talented," he observed, studying the students' preliminary sketches. "I remember when art was just an investment to me, a way to show wealth and taste. I never really saw the power it has to change hearts and minds." Amaya, who had been skeptical of Theodore's reformation, began to thaw as she saw his genuine engagement with their work. "The kids in our program," she said one day, "they've started asking him to share his story. They see it as proof that real change is possible." The wedding venue, the restored Key family estate, underwent its own transformation. Under Laura's direction, the once imposing mansion became a space of welcome and warmth. Local artists were commissioned to create installations throughout the grounds, turning symbols of old money into celebrations of new possibilities. Theodore spent hours in the estate's greenhouse, working alongside the gardeners to restore the space where Rob had once confronted him. "Your mother loved this place," he told Rob one afternoon as they surveyed the blooming flowers. "She would have adored Laura, you know. She always said our world needed more beauty, more truth." Rob's voice was thick with emotion when he replied, "She would have been proud of who you're becoming." The Foundation's work continued to expand. Laura's latest gallery exhibition, featuring artists from their programs alongside established names, drew international attention. Critics praised the way it challenged traditional power structures while celebrating the possibility of redemption. One piece particularly moved visitors, a massive collaborative work created by youth program students, reformed executives, and artists from diverse backgrounds. At its center, a photograph showed Theodore working with young artists, his face alight with genuine joy as he helped them mix colors. "That's real," Haley observed, standing beside Laura at the gallery opening. "The way he lights up with those kids. You can't fake that kind of transformation." Laura nodded, remembering her own journey from skepticism to cautious hope. People can surprise you if you give them the chance to be better than their worst moments. As the wedding day approached, Theodore asked for a private moment with Laura. They met in the gallery after hours, surrounded by art that told stories of change and redemption. "I've been trying to find the right words," he began, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain, "to express what your forgiveness has meant, not just to me, but to everyone touched by the changes it inspired." Laura studied him thoughtfully. "Forgiveness isn't a gift freely given," she said. "It's earned through consistent action, through proving that change is real and lasting." "I understand that now." Theodore gestured to the artwork around them. "Every piece here tells a story of transformation, including mine." He hesitated, then continued, "I know I have no right to ask, but would you consider letting me speak at the wedding? Not as Rob's father, but as someone whose life was transformed by your love story." Laura felt tears prick her eyes, remembering all the pain and fear this man had once caused. But she also saw the truth of his change, the genuine effort he had made to become someone better. "Yes," she said simply, "because your story is part of ours now, the hard parts and the healing." The next day, as they worked on final wedding preparations, Rob found Laura in their penthouse office. She was reviewing photographs for a special exhibition, images documenting their journey from that first meeting in the gallery to the present moment. "You've given my father something priceless," Rob said softly, wrapping his arms around her. "The chance to become someone he can be proud of." Laura leaned back against him, watching the sun set over Manhattan. "We all deserve that chance," she replied. "To grow beyond our past, to create something beautiful from pain." Their love had done more than survive attempts to break it. It had become a catalyst for transformation, touching lives far beyond their own. As they stood together, watching darkness give way to city lights, they knew their wedding would celebrate not just their union, but the power of love to change hearts and heal wounds. Theodore's voice drifted up from the garden below, where he was helping youth program students set up their installation. His laugh, once sharp with superiority, now carried genuine warmth. Laura smiled, touching her mother's earrings. "Ready for the next chapter?" Rob murmured against her hair. "With you?" "Always." Laura turned in his arms, her heart full of the future they would build together. "Our love broke chains I didn't even know I carried. Now we get to help others break free too." The city stretched out before them, a canvas waiting to be transformed by the power of forgiveness, the strength of love, and the endless possibility of change. Chapter 11. Love's Triumph. The Key family estate bloomed with new life as the wedding preparations entered their final week. Laura stood in what had once been a formal ballroom, now transformed into a gallery space, showcasing work from artists in their foundations programs. Her reflection in the antique mirrors showed a woman radiant with purpose, her dark skin glowing against the silk of her cream-colored dress. "The lighting needs adjusting over the youth program installation," she called to Maya, who was directing the technical team. The piece in question, a collaborative work showing hands of different colors breaking through barriers, would serve as the backdrop for their ceremony. Theodore appeared in the doorway, his arms full of fresh flowers from the greenhouse. "The students' garden installation is complete," he reported, his former aristocratic manner replaced by genuine enthusiasm. "They've created something remarkable with those recycled materials." Laura smiled, remembering how this same man had once seen her as beneath his notice. Now he worked alongside young artists from backgrounds he would have previously dismissed, learning from them as much as he taught. "Have you finished your speech?" she asked, noting how he still carried himself with careful humility, conscious of the privilege he was learning to understand. Almost. Theodore set down the flowers. It's challenging, finding words to express how love can transform not just hearts, but entire worlds. He hesitated, then added, Rob's mother would have loved what you've done with this place. She always said these halls needed more life, more truth. The mention of Rob's mother brought a familiar ache to Laura's heart. She touched her own mother's earrings, thinking of the parents who couldn't be present physically, but whose spirits infused every aspect of their celebration. Haley burst in, designer heels clicking against marble floors. The caterers want to review the menu changes, something about incorporating both African and traditional American dishes. I'll handle it, Laura said, noting how naturally Haley now worked alongside everyone, her former prejudices replaced by genuine respect. And the youth program students? Already working with the culinary team to learn about fusion cuisine. Haley's pride in her students shone through. They're creating original dishes for the reception. The days flew by in a whirlwind of final preparations. The estate, once a symbol of exclusivity and privilege, became a hub of creative energy. Artists worked alongside former executives in the rehabilitation program, creating installations that told stories of transformation and hope. Rob found Laura in the greenhouse late one evening, surrounded by sketches for the ceremony layout. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, breathing in the scent of her coconut oil hair products that now mingled with the fragrance of blooming flowers. Having second thoughts about turning our wedding into a living art installation, he teased gently. Laura leaned back against him. Never. This is who we are. People who see beauty in unexpected places, who believe in the power of art to change hearts. Their conversation was interrupted by Detective Chen's arrival. Since helping expose the corruption in New York's elite circles, she had become a close friend and ally in their work for social change. Thought you'd want to see this, Chen said, holding up a tablet. The screen showed news coverage of other cities adopting their foundation's model for corporate rehabilitation and arts education. Their love story had sparked a movement that was spreading across the country. And this, Chen continued, swiping to another article. It detailed how several major galleries and corporations had adopted new policies on diversity and inclusion, directly citing the Sterling Gallery's transformation as inspiration. The night before the wedding, they hosted a private dinner for those who had been part of their journey, Maya and her girlfriend, who now ran the Foundation's international programs, Detective Chen and her team, the youth program students and their families, former executives from the rehabilitation program who had found new purpose in mentoring others. Theodore rose to speak, his hands trembling slightly as he held his glass. A year ago, I thought I knew what legacy meant, he began. I thought it was about preserving power, maintaining control. My son and Laura taught me that true legacy is about creating change that lifts others up. He turned to face the young artists from the program. You showed me what real strength looks like, the courage to create despite obstacles, to speak truth through art, to believe in possibility. My greatest privilege now is learning from you. Haley spoke next, her usual polish softened by genuine emotion. Laura, when your father married me, I was too blind to see the gift I was being given. A daughter whose strength and vision would change not just my life, but countless others. The evening continued with stories shared, bridges built, and new connections forged. Laura watched it all from Rob's arms, marveling at how their love had created this space, where barriers of race, class, and privilege dissolved in the face of shared humanity. Later, in their penthouse, Rob held Laura as they looked out over the city lights. Remember that first night in the gallery? He asked. When you caught me staring at that installation? You mean when you pretended to be there by chance, even though you'd read all my articles and planned the whole encounter? Laura teased. Best planning I ever did." Rob kissed her temple. "Though I never planned on you completely transforming my worldview and sparking a social movement." "Love does that," Laura mused. "When it's real, it changes everything it touches." The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. The estate grounds hummed with activity as final preparations were made. The greenhouse, where Rob had once confronted his father, now housed an installation about growth and transformation. The formal gardens featured sculptures created by youth program students working alongside established artists. Laura prepared in what had once been the Key family's private wing. Maya helped her into her wedding dress, a stunning creation that combined contemporary design with subtle elements honoring her African heritage. Her mother's earrings provided the finishing touch, carrying all the love and strength of generations. There was a knock at the door. Theodore stood there, looking uncertain. "The guests are arriving," he reported, "and there's something you should see." He led Laura to a window overlooking the front drive. A line of cars stretched into the distance, not just their invited guests, but members of the community, artists, students, and families touched by their foundation's work. They carried flowers and handmade signs celebrating love's triumph over prejudice. "They're calling it a movement," Theodore said softly. "Your love story has become a symbol of change." Laura felt tears prick her eyes. "It's more than a symbol," she replied. "It's a promise that love can break chains, heal wounds, and create new possibilities." The ceremony space filled with an unprecedented mixture of people, corporate executives and street artists, society matrons and community activists, all brought together by a love story that had become something larger than itself. As Laura prepared to walk down the aisle, she caught her reflection in an antique mirror. She saw not just a bride, but a warrior for change, a builder of bridges, a woman who had turned opposition into opportunity. Her dark skin glowed with joy, her natural curls crowned with small white flowers, every inch of her radiating the beauty of authenticity. "Ready?" Maya asked, adjusting Laura's train. Laura touched her mother's earrings one last time. "Ready to write the next chapter," she replied. "With every step, we're creating the world we want to see." The music began, a fusion of classical pieces and African rhythms, performed by students from their programs. Laura took her first step toward the future she and Rob had dared to dream, knowing their love had already changed countless lives and would continue to inspire generations to come. Chapter 12. The wedding dawn broke over the Key estate in a symphony of rose and gold, as if nature itself was celebrating the day's significance. Laura stood at her dressing room window, watching the sun paint the gardens where their love story would reach its beautiful culmination. The morning air carried the scent of blooming flowers and endless possibility. Maya found her there, still in her silk robe, lost in thought. "Everyone's asking for you," she said softly. "The hair team, the makeup artists." "Just give me one more minute," Laura whispered, touching her mother's earrings. In the growing light, she could almost imagine her parents were there, her father's proud smile, her mother's gentle hands. A tear slipped down her cheek. "Hey now," Maya stepped forward, carefully wiping the tear away. "None of that. Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become, the barriers you've broken, the lives you've changed." The next hours passed in a blur of intimate moments and final preparations. Laura's aunt, who had flown in from South Africa, sang traditional songs as she helped with the bride's preparations. Their voices filled the room with memories of Laura's childhood, of strength passed down through generations. The wedding dress was a masterpiece of cultural fusion, contemporary elegance mixed with subtle African design elements. The bodice featured intricate beadwork in patterns that told stories of love and resilience, while the flowing skirt moved like water when Laura walked. Her natural curls were styled in an elaborate updo, adorned with tiny white flowers and gold threads that caught the light. A knock at the door revealed Haley, holding a small box. "I found this in your father's things," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "He'd been saving it." Inside was a delicate gold anklet, engraved with words in Xhosa, "Love breaks all chains." Laura's hands trembled as Haley fastened it around her ankle. "I was so wrong," her stepmother whispered, "about everything. You've taught me what real strength looks like." Another surprise awaited. The youth program students had created a special installation in the hallway leading to the ceremony space. Hundreds of paper cranes hung from the ceiling, each one carrying messages of hope and love, written by people whose lives had been touched by Laura and Rob's story. Theodore appeared as Laura prepared to make her entrance. He had asked to escort her part of the way, not to give her away, she was her own woman, but to symbolize how love had transformed them all. "You've given us all a gift," he said, offering his arm. "The courage to change, to grow, to become better than we were." The ceremony space took everyone's breath away. The collaborative art installation created by their foundation's students served as a backdrop, a massive piece showing hands of all colors, breaking through barriers, reaching toward light. The greenhouse's climbing roses had been encouraged to create natural arches, while African textile patterns were projected in subtle light designs across the floor. As the music began, a fusion of classical strings and African drums, the guests rose. The audience itself was a testament to change. Corporate executives seated beside community activists, gallery owners next to emerging artists, society matrons alongside students from their programs. Love had dissolved the barriers that once seemed insurmountable. Rob waited at the altar, his eyes filling with tears as he saw Laura. She was radiant, her dark skin glowing with joy, every step full of grace and power. Their eyes met and held, and in that moment, every struggle they'd faced seemed worth it. The ceremony combined traditions with bold new elements. They exchanged conventional vows, but added their own promises to continue fighting for change, to use their love as a force for good, to keep breaking chains that bind others. The youth program choir performed a soul-stirring rendition of "Bridge Over Troubled Water," their young voices carrying messages of hope and unity. When Rob kissed his bride, the applause was thunderous. But it wasn't just clapping. The students began a traditional African celebration song, their voices joined by Laura's family members until the whole gathering was part of the joyful noise. The reception transformed the estate's grounds into a magical space where art, music, and love intertwined. Food stations featured fusion dishes created by culinary students, combining African and American flavors in exciting new ways. Artwork from their programs was displayed throughout, each piece telling stories of transformation. Their first dance surprised everyone. Instead of a traditional waltz, they performed a choreographed piece that incorporated both ballroom and African dance elements. As they moved together, projections on the dance floor showed their journey, from that first meeting in the gallery to the triumphs and challenges that had shaped their love. Theodore's speech brought tears to every eye. He spoke not as the powerful man he'd once been, but as someone humbled and transformed by love's power. "My son and Laura showed me that real strength isn't about maintaining walls," he said, his voice breaking. "It's about having the courage to break them down." Maya's toast celebrated their friendship and perseverance. "Love isn't just about romance," she declared. "It's about fighting for what's right, about seeing possibility where others see barriers." Rob and Laura didn't just fall in love, they used their love to change the world. As evening fell, the estate lit up with thousands of tiny lights, Art installations glowed with internal illumination, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. Students performed pop-up dance numbers they'd choreographed themselves, their joy infectious and pure. Later, Laura and Rob slipped away to the greenhouse where their confrontation with Theodore had once taken place. Now it was filled with peace and beauty, the air sweet with blooming flowers. "Look what our love built," Laura whispered, gesturing to the celebration visible through the glass walls. "Not just a wedding, but a movement." Rob pulled her close, careful of her stunning dress. "You changed everything," he murmured against her hair. "My life, my family, this whole city. You showed us all what love can do." "We did it together," Laura corrected, touching her mother's earrings, "every step of the way." They rejoined their guests as the evening reached its peak. The dance floor was packed, corporate executives learning African dance moves from teenage students, gallery owners and community activists laughing together, barriers continuing to dissolve in the magic of the moment. As midnight approached, Laura and Rob prepared to leave, for their honeymoon. But first, they had one last surprise. Together, they unveiled a new foundation initiative, a massive expansion of their arts and education programs, funded by the key fortune that would now serve to break down the very barriers it had once maintained. The crowd cheered as they made their exit through an arch of raised hands, hands of all colors, ages, and backgrounds, joined together in celebration of love's triumph. Rose petals rained down, catching in Laura's curls like stars. In the car, heading toward their future, Laura leaned against Rob's shoulder. "Ready for our next chapter?" she asked. "With you?" "I'm ready for anything," he replied, kissing her softly. Behind them, the celebration continued, a beacon of hope and change in the night. Their wedding hadn't just been a ceremony. It had been a declaration that love, when pure and fearless, could transform not just two hearts, but an entire world. The Key estate, once a symbol of exclusion and privilege, had become a gateway to a new way of being. And as Laura and Rob drove toward their future, they carried with them the knowledge that their love story would continue to inspire others to break chains, cross boundaries, and believe in the power of transformation. Subscribe. If you loved,